Um, Really going completely opposite ends of the spectrum now. We're going to look at a fly for reaction. Really, um, can be very effective in clear water. So certainly don't discount it. But also can work well if after heavy rain when the river's colouring up. This is the funky shrimp, and it's one that I first worked on purely, I suppose, as an experiment. Really, I walked into a tackle shop and saw two dubbing colours that looked nothing like each other, and I just thought, well, what happens if I mix the two together? What will happen? So essentially, and bear with me, they will look garish. I took UV Lavender by Hareline and mixed it with UV fluorescent hot pink, and the combination just gave me something completely different. Almost very similar to a popular dubbing now, which is the Hen's number 17 Spectra, which is a dubbing that's really come to light in competition fishing. The difference with this blend, and hopefully I'll be able to show you with a UV torch here, as the hot pink fibres are picked out, while as the lavender is quite a dead colour. So you've got a mixture of visual stimulus for the fish. And someone quite rightly pointed out once that, well, the fish don't have a UV torch, so how will they know? But actually they see a lot of different colours than ourselves. So by incorporating the UV colour spectrum as well, we know that we're just adding a different element to our fly. Some days it does prove better, other days it doesn't. But it's better to have the option than not have the option at all. Weighting wise, different from our previous shrimp patterns. Now we're going with a much more traditional style of weighting flies. So here we have a 0.37 millimeter just oval wire, lead wire, and I'm just going to do a lead wrap. Very simply, I allow the wire to rotate round in my finger rather than clamping down and twisting the wire, which can cause it to break. Try and let the wire rotate round so it's not twisting on itself. You'll find that when you're doing a long wire length, that you won't get any annoying breakages halfway along, generally. And so I'm looking to go from almost the back of where my fly will be, so I'm about an eighth from the back, and we'll do roughly the same from the front. Use your thumbnail just to push against the wire and cut it out, and use the other thumbnail to get the back. And now, like a lot of my shrimp patterns, I'm actually looking to get them down quickly. I want them down near the bottom, and I don't want to wait. If I want them to go down slower, I tend to go for a smaller fly rather than one with less weight. So I'm actually going to do a half length again on top of this wire. So just wrapping that round, and that will help also create the body shape of the whole fly. So there we go, we've got a nice amount of weight on there, so it's going to get down, but it's also going to give us that nice shrimpy buggy shape. Here site change your thread, we've got the Semperfli wax thread in fluorescent pink, and that's because I'm also going to utilise this for the rib, and I really want it to stand out on the fly and add to it. So whenever working with a wire under wrap, start your thread off, keep your tag end quite long, and then I'll lengthen the bobbin and now place quite loose turns on top of the wire. So you're creating a wrap, but you're not cutting into the wire until you get to the other end. Now you can create a little dam, a little buttress, and that will stop the wire opening out when you put firmer turns in. We can cut that tag out now, and before we do anything else, I'm going to do a crisscross of thread turns on the wire. This just makes tying the rest of the fly that much easier. And now take our thread all the way down to where we want the back of the fly to be. Now for the back, it's not very realistic, or I say it's not very realistic, the fish obviously think otherwise. I've got a pearl flat tinsel, a really quite broad one. I think this is 4 or 5 mil, it would be 4 mil thick, and we use that for the back material rather than a traditional shrimp back. So it doesn't have any stretch to it, but we just have to bear that in mind when we're working with it. But the way that we tie it in is exactly the same. So we want to cut an arrow shape in there, and again lay it on our side and allow the thread to rotate it round the shank into position so it's on top of the shank and ready to go. Now we can work our thread forward to the beginning of the fly there, and now we can take our fairly colourful dubbing mitts, where for anyone that hasn't blended dubbing before, you really should. It's just a great way of expanding your materials and replicating different things. So for this particular fly, I've taken 50% of the UV hot pink, 50% of the UV lavender, and placed them together. Just by doing that, that's not blended. So what we want to do, like with hare's ear, is put it in the palm of our hand and use the index finger and rotate it. That will help just marry the fibres together, and then we want to pull them apart, push them together, and just keep doing that. The best thing to do is to do this in a batch, so to sit there and just do a whole load in one go, and usually luckily here I've got a fly tidy, so when I am doing it I clear everything out the way, just do it, and then I can pick up any of the loose fibres and put them back into the blend. If you don't have that luxury, if you do it over a plate or something like that, it just allows you to capture the falling fibres and make sure that you've got the blend all together. So once you're happy that the blend is mixed, we can start by adding it to the material. So to begin adding it to the thread. So to begin with, I just get it so it's attached to the thread, and then I'll start tightening the uppermost part. Slide that up to the hook and start a few locking turns. Now you can start tightening closer to the back of the dubbing, working your way forward. That will give you a nice tight dubbing mitt, and now you can hold it down and work your way back. So you'll see almost looks purple at this point, but actually those touches of pink will capture. And because it's a blend that you've done, you'll find that sometimes there'll be more pink, sometimes there'll be more purple. So each fly has natural variation, which is exactly like everything in nature. No two things are ever the same. So to be able to have a fly that also has natural variation to it really is strengthening your armoury. So we're making this nice and tight. So we tapered up to the fattest part in the middle, and now we're tapering back down to a thin section at the back. And get a few turns. If you've got a bit too much dubbing, you can always just pull it out with your thumbnail. Make sure that that's laid down tight. That is the back forward. Take a thread turn round underneath it. So this colour right here might look really garish, but actually it looks unnatural. But take it to a natural environment. If you placed it against the rainbow stripe on a rainbow trout, you'll see that colour there. If you put it on the gill plate of a grayling, you'll see that colour there. So it is, whilst looking completely unnatural, it's a colour that appears over and over again in the underwater world. So it should be one that we hone in on and look to replicate. Now, to do the back, ease it forward and take your thread. Being a broad tinsel, it's less forgiving than a shellback style, a rubber shellback. So it can slip, but the benefit with having these nice strong threads is you can allow them to dig in a little bit, and the dubbing will cushion it to an extent. So just making sure each turn is tight, opening the turns out towards the middle of the fly, and then once you're past middling, making them closer together again. And then the final one, couple in front, or a couple behind and a couple in front. Just hold over it, rock the hook back there, just so the thread doesn't fall off now, and you can trim out the shrimp back material. And using the thread, and one of the benefits of using this hot pink thread is you create a nice hot spot right at the front of the fly. Go in with your whip finish tool and finish that off. So you may be asking yourself, or saying to yourself, that looks nothing like a shrimp. So really, we just call it a shrimp. It fishes the same way as our shrimp patterns, but really it's probably more the colour that's pulling the fish in, and by all means you can try different colours, but this is a great shrimp pattern particularly for grayling, but also rainbow trout works very well on, and usually in dirty water brown trout will also take it quite happily as well. So there we have it, the funky shrimp.